The proposal sat at the center of the conference table, a 30-page document that represented a potential $40,000 quarterly contract. To most small business owners, this would be a moment of pure celebration. But for Andrew Victor, it was a moment of acute mathematical dread. He looked across the small office at his 3 employees, a designer, a copywriter, and a project manager, who were all visibly at their limit. They were already managing 12 active accounts. Their calendars were a solid wall of back-to-back meetings, and the quality of their work was only being maintained through sheer human endurance and 80-hour weeks. Andrew picked up a pen and began scratching numbers onto the back of a notepad. To service this new client properly, he needed a 5th person, a senior account manager with a salary of at least $85,000. But once he factored in payroll, taxes, benefits, and the overhead of a larger office, that new hire would consume nearly every cent of the profit the new contract was supposed to generate. He was caught in the headcount trap, a structural ceiling where growth actually makes a boutique agency less profitable. If he signed the contract and did not hire, his team would burn out. If he hired, his margins would vanish, and the agency would become more fragile. Andrew set the pen down, realizing that the traditional model of scaling an agency was no longer a path to stability, but a path to permanent stress. This is a case study in how Andrew broke that cycle, not by hiring more people, but by building an AI infrastructure that allowed his 4-person team to produce the output of 10, reaching a monthly revenue run rate of $180,000 without adding a single desk to the office. To understand the shift, one must first look at the invisible, exhausting friction of the manual boutique agency. Before the pivot, Andrew Victor's agency operated on a model that had remained unchanged for decades: the exchange of human hours for client deliverables. A typical Tuesday began at 7 in the morning with a chaotic all-hands meeting that was essentially a 2-hour exercise in manual triage. The team would spend the first half of the day simply trying to figure out what was due and who was doing it. The copywriter would spend 6 hours researching a niche industry for a single blog post. The designer would spend 4 hours manually resizing assets for different platforms. The project manager would spend half their day chasing clients for feedback via email. This was the shadow work of the agency, the massive volume of administrative and preparatory labor that is never seen by the client, but consumes the majority of the agency's bandwidth. Andrew was the most pressured of them all, acting as the primary researcher and strategist because his team was too consumed by the production grind to think at a higher level. At the end of these days, the office felt heavy with the weight of unbillable time. Andrew found himself working past midnight just to handle the strategic work that clients were actually paying for. He was the founder of a growing agency, yet he was living in a state of permanent exhaustion, earning less per hour than his senior staff once expenses were factored in. He seriously considered capping the agency's growth entirely, resigning himself to smaller projects and lower ambitions just to reclaim his own time. The problem transitioned from a personal frustration to a business crisis when a second major lead came in just days after the first. Andrew sat in his car in the parking lot staring at the notification on his phone, feeling guilt instead of excitement. He realized that his business was physically unable to grow. The threat was not a lack of market demand, it was a lack of operational elasticity. Every agency owner reaches this point, the moment where you realize that your primary product is human labor, and human labor does not scale. The consequence of this realization was a period of deep internal reflection. Andrew saw that he was not really running a creative agency. He was running a manual labor firm that happened to produce digital assets. If he remained on this path, he would always be held hostage by his own headcount, forced to spend his professional life managing people who were managing tasks, creating a structure that would eventually collapse under its own weight. He reached a point where he understood that he had to stop being a manager of people and start being an architect of systems. He needed a way to increase the output of his current team dramatically without increasing their pressure by a single degree. The discovery of a new model began when Andrew stopped looking for a new hire and started looking for a digital infrastructure. He took his team off-site for 2 days and mapped out every single minute of their working week, identifying every task that was repetitive, data-heavy, or non-creative. He realized that 60% of their creative work was actually clerical work, masquerading as design and writing. He began building a proprietary AI-assisted deliverable pipeline. Instead of the copywriter starting from a blank page, Andrew built a research and briefing engine that utilized specialized models to process a client's industry data, competitor messaging, and customer pain points in seconds. The AI would generate a comprehensive creative brief and a structured first draft that was 80% accurate, which meant the copywriter moved immediately into the role of editor and strategist, spending their energy on the final 20% of nuance that a machine cannot replicate. He then moved to the design workflow, implementing generative processes that handled the tedious tasks of asset variation and basic layout. The trial and error process was demanding. The first outputs the AI produced were too generic and required excessive correction. Andrew realized he could not rely on a general-purpose tool. He had to build knowledge bases for each client, feeding the system their past brand voice, their successful campaigns, and their specific style guides. This was the moment he understood that the technology was not just a tool. It was a force multiplier for his team's existing talent, and it only worked as well as the intelligence he fed into it. The transformation of the agency's operations reached its peak when Andrew moved beyond content production and into the coordination layer. He built an AI-driven reporting and analytics dashboard for clients that functioned as an automated account manager. Instead of the project manager spending all of Friday pulling data into a presentation, the system ingested live data from the client's advertising accounts and social feeds, using natural language generation to produce a weekly narrative report that explained exactly what the numbers meant and what the recommended next steps were. This turned a 4-hour manual task into a 5-minute review process. A specific moment of clarity occurred 3 months into this shift. Andrew was sitting in the office on a Friday afternoon when he noticed the quiet was different. Usually, Fridays were a controlled emergency. He looked at the project management board and saw that the entire month's worth of deliverables for their largest client had been completed, approved, and scheduled in just 2 weeks. His team was not stressed. They were ahead. They had effectively doubled their capacity while working fewer hours. This was the moment Andrew understood that the ceiling was gone. The agency was no longer limited by how many people were in the room. It was only limited by the quality of the instructions they gave the system. The results of this shift were reflected in a revenue trajectory that would have been impossible under the old model. By increasing the volume and strategic depth of their deliverables, Andrew was able to handle double the client load with the same staff. The agency reached a monthly revenue run rate of $180,000, a figure that in the manual model would have required a staff of 10 to 12 people. Because his headcount remained at 4, his net profit margin surged to nearly 60%, a number rarely seen in the boutique agency world. But the results extended beyond the financials. The team's morale reached an all-time high because they were finally doing the high-level creative work they were hired for. The designer was no longer resizing banners. They were directing brand aesthetics. The copywriter was no longer producing SEO filler. They were crafting brand narratives. Andrew moved from being a frantic operator to a strategic founder, spending his time on business development and planning 6 months ahead. The agency had become a lean, high-output operation where intelligence was the primary asset and labor was secondary. The lessons from Andrew Victor's agency serve as a clear roadmap for the next generation of boutique firms. The hard truth for 2026 is that the agencies that will survive and grow are not the ones that scale their headcount, but the ones that scale their intelligence. In the modern economy, Hiring more people to solve a capacity problem is an outdated response to a structural challenge that technology has already solved. To build a truly profitable agency, you must stop being a provider of human labor and start being an operator of automated systems. You must find the intersection where your team's unique creative judgment meets the raw throughput of an AI infrastructure. Andrew did not win by being a better agency owner in the traditional sense. He won by refusing to accept the headcount trap as an inevitable constraint. The question you have to ask yourself today is a direct one. If you could produce 4 times the work with your current team tomorrow, would you use that capacity to chase more clients? Or would you use it to finally deliver the quality you have always been capable of? The answer to that question is the difference between an agency that is a job and an agency that generates real, durable profit. We want to hear from you in the comments. What is the one task that is currently holding your team at capacity, and what would your profit margins look like if you never had to hire for that role again? Let us discuss how to break the headcount trap in the comments below. To see the specific research pipelines and reporting dashboards Andrew used to scale his output, watch our next video on the automated agency stack.